Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaron from Jeranism, back with another live video for you. An interesting video, I'm sure, as today I'll be having a conversation with a PhD Glober. I can't tell you how long it will be. Hopefully we'll keep it, about 2 hours or less. But I'm having a conversation today with Matt, and he is a person much like 99% of the world who believes he lives on a globe. Will he change my mind, or will I change his is very doubtful. But what will happen is we will show you that two adults with different beliefs can have a rational conversation without name-calling, without demeaning personal attacks, without screaming or hate-fueled rhetoric. So that alone should be a step in the right direction. If you have a comment or question for either of us, you can feel free to use the super chat that runs alongside this live stream. But let me first introduce myself. I'm Jaron from Jeranism, and I no longer believe that I'm living on a spinning space rock flying through outer space at ridiculous speeds. I now believe the world is exactly as it presents itself to be, obviously and observably flat, level, and stationary. So I'll now introduce my guest and let him tell you a little bit about himself and his beliefs and exactly how this conversation came to be. And he is Matt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jaron, nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. I'm also very much looking forward to a civil conversation. And I totally agree with you that even if neither of us walk away having shifted our beliefs in any way, that just having a civil conversation is productive. Just being able to talk about this, being able to present our beliefs and our views and push back with each other, but in a civil, respectful way is not a small thing. And I'm with you. I think the more conversations like this that we can have, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, totally agree.
Just to go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying I totally agree. I think it's very important, and the way that I shape my beliefs is, to take everything that I can in. So I love when two different people of different opinions get together and have a chat. Usually that happens in a debate setting where I don't feel like I learn as much because it's more about attacks and people get fueled. So I tend to lose a little bit of the importance of that conversation in debates. But I think just a conversation like we're about to have is beneficial to both sides of the argument. I think people will be able to hear us out, and then they can formulate their own beliefs based on that and what side better fits the reality that we observe every day. So yeah, go ahead and tell people, who you are and how this conversation came to be.
Sure. So as you said, I am a globe believer, and I'll add to that gravity enthusiast.
Oh, no, sorry,
I guess you could say. So just so listeners have a context for my perspective, and my training is in psychology. So I have a PhD in experimental social psychology, which is basically means that I'm trained to do research, to use a scientific method, to better understand the way that the human mind works. And social psychologists hone in on the way that our social environment impacts us, the way we think, feel, and behave. I also have a master's degree in cognitive science, so again, an experimental degree in psychology. So that training was more focused on just understanding the way the mind works, not necessarily taking into account the social environment. So these two areas actually work really well together within psychology because they're both looking at the way the mind works. But social psychologists tend to really try and bring in the social environment into that understanding. So that's my training. That's where I'm coming from. So just so listeners understand, I don't have specialized training in physics, engineering, surveying, any of those fields. Anything that I would present is based on the training that I got in high school, college, and just the training, I guess, that the information I've been exposed to just listening to YouTube videos. And so how this conversation came to be is, I don't remember how long ago it was, but in terms of my own journey, I watch YouTube videos all the time. So I remember watching a YouTube video, and then below it.
Hold on, real quick. A
Yeah.
PhD scientist watches YouTube all the time. I thought the only thing you can find on YouTube is garbage.
Well, I think YouTube, I mean, it's like, I guess I would say the information on YouTube is like the information everywhere else these days on the internet, that we have an incredible amount of access to information. And so the trick is to assess the source quality.
Good.
And I think there's good information in many places, including YouTube. We just have to be, I just think we have to make sure that we're paying attention to the source and vetting as best as we can the quality of that source. So yeah, does that answer your question or address your comment?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think I hear it all the time that people say, oh, you get your research off YouTube, and I think that everything that possibly could be out there is somewhere on YouTube. It's pretty much the case. And so, yeah, you do have to go through and listen to what you're being presented, and I think that's what's so awesome about YouTube is it allows me to listen to various people's opinions and then weigh them against reality and what I see in my life, and that's how I move forward. And so, yeah, sometimes you'll get strange little nuggets of truth from the most crazy, channels, and sometimes I'll get what I think is flat out lies from the channels that most people would respect. So it comes down to a personal belief, and I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where I've realized that two people can look at the same evidence and reach different conclusions quite easily.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this discussion we're having is a great example. I think another one that is really interesting to me, being someone who was Christian, grew up in a Christian household, is the mythicist versus historicist debate around Jesus. Was Jesus a real person, or was he a mythological character? And there are scholars on both sides looking at the same information,
right,
and coming to radically different conclusions. So yeah, I agree. It's as a psychologist, it's fascinating to me that people kind of fall out into these different groups who are all looking at the same information.
So that's an interesting point. I did not know that about you. If people don't know, we've Skyped, messages back and forth, and I think we had a short conversation some months ago. Unfortunately, I can't recall exactly what we talked about. I have quite a few of those conversations, but I know that we've gone back and forth, and I don't think you ever mentioned that point. Let me ask you this, just a question of my own.
Mm-hmm.
When you fell away from, and I'm guessing you have, or fallen away from those beliefs, was it because of your scientific training that made you see the holes in religion, or what was it that brought you to the place that you are today in regards to your beliefs around religion?
Sure. Let's see. So I have fallen away from those beliefs in terms of being a Christian. When it was Descartes who actually had a big impact on me. For anyone who's not familiar with Descartes' work, he's a philosopher. Forget the years he was alive, but he went through this process. He describes it in one of his books. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but he goes through this process of basically abandoning all of his beliefs and then starting from scratch as much as I guess that's possible, and saying, okay, what can I know to be true? And he was one of the one of the pioneers of the rationalist in philosophy. One of these two camps of philosophy in terms of epistemology. How do we know what we know? And he was all about reason, an internal process. And I've been reading that and kind of feeling inspired and saying, you know what, I'm going to do that with my religion, with my spiritual religious life. And so I tried to put aside all beliefs about God's existence and who God is, etc., and just started from scratch and said, okay, maybe I'll end up an atheist, maybe I'll end up a theist. I have no idea where I'll end up. And my journey has so far brought me to a place of not being religious, more spiritual, and more of the path of the mystic, trying to kind of taste divinity directly and experientially. And I also have a meditation practice, so I definitely pull from Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism, but I also pull from other traditions that are not Eastern, but they tend to be more indigenous traditions.
Well, that's good. I like that you at least pick and choose and don't just subscribe to one person's beliefs and say, oh, no, I believe everything that he believes. I like people that can kind of feel it out. In the discourse on the method, Descartes said, and I really like this, he says, I entirely abandoned the study of letters, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that of which can be found in myself, or else in the great book of the world. I spent the rest of my youth traveling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of diverse temperaments and ranks, gathering various experiences, testing myself in the situations which fortune offered me, and at times reflecting upon whether it came my way so as to derive some profit from it. And I look back at that in my coming to, this truth belief and this truth search. And I followed the same thing where I said, I truly believe if there is a creator, a God, a spirit out there, that all I need to do to find that is look within myself and to look at the nature of the world, the book of nature, which would describe everything for me. And that's what I've tried to do. So I'm glad we at least have a little bit of a good starting point there.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to talk about, did I talk about my training? Yeah, I talked about my training, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Bit.
I just want listeners to understand like that, where I'm coming from with that. Yeah. Was there? I feel like there was a question you asked me to respond to that I didn't. Is that the case?
No. I think I got sidetracked when I mentioned about the religious upbringing, simply because I think that a lot of people like myself that fell away from our religion at a I wouldn't say a young age, in my teens, late teens, and into my 20s, I kind of fell away, but never fully gave it up until, I started to really look into it, and this was in my 30s, that I basically saw a lot of lies and a lot of deception in religion, and basically decided that I wanted to seek other truths. And when I did that, the first one that was there, with open arms saying, come over here, we do everything by testing and by experiment, and there is no beliefs here, was science. And science was a great back for me to fall into, and I did fall into it and became an atheist for the better part of a year. And basically, the reason for that was because science was there telling me, hey, we know all the truths and we know all the answers, and so it was very easy for me to fall into that trap. I was just wondering if kind of the same thing was true for you. But go ahead, do you have an answer for that? Or
well, and maybe I don't want to like jump into our discussion before we start, but I think that it's personally I would say that the scientific method is the best. And I think we talked about this a little bit in our phone conversation and over Skype. I think the scientific method is probably the best that we can do for now as human beings. I don't think any process of inquiry carried out by us can ever be value-free and completely objective. I suppose the only way we'll get to that point is if we build robots that can do research for us. I suppose that might create complete objectivity and value-free research. But then again, we'll still be programming the robots.
Right,
Maybe that won't even be possible.
Who made the robots? Yeah.
Right, or if they start making themselves, there might be a set of values that are instantiated in like the way they program themselves. So perhaps a completely objective method of inquiry is just impossible, and without like a God's eye view, which none of us will ever be able to have.
Right, it's very tough.
And I do try and separate the process of science from the body of knowledge, and I think that what you and I like, so what globe earthers and flat earthers can at least agree on is that we all adopt a scientific method, even if, I'm going to accept more of the body of science than you are.
Okay, true.
Yeah.
I do think that, okay, so being an experimental psychologist, and you
Mhm.
said you base a lot of what you might study is around the social aspect of it.
Yeah. So, for example, my own research, just to give you an example, some of my research looks at the way our unconscious mind works
Okay.
and looks at the ways in which we can have beliefs about groups of people and feelings towards groups of people unconsciously. And those unconscious beliefs and feelings, the beliefs are what we call stereotypes, and the feelings are what we call prejudice when it applies to a whole group of people. Um, we can have those, and they might not be in line with how we feel and think at a conscious level. Um, and
Right.
so,
I mean,
so
my
that's an example.
yeah, and my belief in that would be that when you're talking about something like flat Earth, I think it's definitely without any question that the reason why the globe Earth is taught at such a young age, when children can't even fathom what they're being told, the reason that they are taught so quickly and explained away, and the globe is put in every classroom and on every commercial and video, movie beginning. You got the Universal, the logo coming around the globe. The reason I think that that is the case is because I think it does cause an unconscious hate or an unconscious unbelief of people who might believe differently than what we're all taught at a very young age. I think that comes into play huge, is that people have all been taught this from the time that they can remember, and there's been no other teaching. I've often stated before that there's no way a person can, and this is different now, but let's go back 5 years. There's no way a person could have left fourth grade in the United States and not believed in a globe. I mean, it was literally a 0% chance that you could come out of fourth grade and not believe in the globe. Whereas I believe that that change has been made now where there's a small chance. I think a lot of children are being taught to question things in school, to question what they're taught. And maybe there are some people coming out of fourth grade at this point who say, nah, I'm still not sold on the globe. Whereas when I grew up, probably when you grew up, there was no chance. And I think that's a huge part of this, and part of what you study, I mean, the social dynamics of what we believe and why we believe it. And if, when everybody in the world believes that you're spinning on a ball and that you don't feel it, then I think that that's a huge reason why people continue to believe it, is because everyone believes it. How could everyone be wrong? How could every scientist be wrong? How could, how could so many people be incorrect about where we live? And therefore, as soon as you hear somebody is a flat earther, you immediately think of them as a lesser person. They don't think like you do. They don't think like scientists do. They don't think like teachers do. They think like imbeciles do, or like ancient desert wandering herdsmen from the tribe of Levi. I think. I mean, that's the way it's kind of looked at, and I think that that's by design. What say you?
Right. So I definitely agree there is a stigma, as far as I can tell, associated with, being in the flat Earth community. So, I mean, that's definitely there. Human beings are very quick to create us versus them, and then to use that social distinction to kind of prop themselves up, internally, emotionally, psychologically, by having, a better than attitude. So yeah, I certainly see that happening. And I imagine there are, social costs to being an outspoken, like a visible flat earther. Though I guess it's tricky when it comes to the schooling thing, because even I agree with you that I think there's a bigger issue that is at work here, that we maybe just need to do a better job of helping students from, a young age, as soon as they can handle it, develop their critical thinking skills, and maybe teach them more.
Well, I think we have a totally different
What?
opinion. I said I think we have a totally different opinion as far as that goes, because I don't think it comes down. I think what they are trying to teach children is an impossible concept anyway, and so they have to kind of sneak it in, and they don't want a lot of it discussed further than that. Now, unless people go into the higher education and they believe that, and they start getting the astrophysics degrees and things like that. But I mean, let's start somewhere simple, like the spin of the Earth. I mean, so at this point in my life, I no longer think that I'm on a spinning Earth, whereas as you do. And so if we went and tried to question that, I mean, here's one of the things I get, and I don't know if this is your your rebuttal to that, but one of the things I've heard people talk about is, oh, well, if you were on a merry-go-round and the merry-go-round went around once a day, that you would never feel that. Have you heard that argument as far as the spin of the Earth goes?
I haven't, but I can see I can understand the logic, the analogy and the logic.
Well, it's an entirely smaller scale. I mean, if we think about a carousel going around once a day, that carousel probably covers, 50 yards of circumference, maybe even less, 25 yards of circumference around that merry-go-round. And so if we then expand that out to, say, a mile. So now picture that the merry-go-round goes around once a day, but it only goes around a mile. Well, that would be still pretty tough you would see that you're moving. You would be able to watch the things go by you as it went by, and that's only a mile. Well, now you have to multiply that by 25,000. Not by 10, not by 50, not by 100, not by 500, but by 25,000. You would be flying off the merry-go-round without a doubt in my mind. You'd be moving 1,000 miles per hour. The scene in front of you would be moving 1,000 miles per hour. You'd be flying off. And to believe that gravity is the only force that's holding you to that spinning, I mean, people just need to picture that. A carousel going around as fast as the Earth goes around, you would have to hold on for your dear life, and the weakest force that there is, the gravitational force, is certainly not enough to keep you attached to the Earth. Not alone just you, but how about the oceans? How about the trillions of pounds and gallons of water that's in the oceans? You have to remember, put that on a carousel, and people are right. If you put that on a carousel and start to spin it, you wouldn't notice anything. But if you now put that on a mile circumference, now you're going to start to see that that's moving. And if you multiply that by 25,000 times, everything on that carousel would be off, would be gone.
Right. Well, I think that the thing is, I think you're talking about, I think there are two different issues that are both part of the scenario and the question you're asking. Like, there's the sensory issue, like how does our nervous system deal with sensory information, and what do we experience at a conscious level? And there's just the physics issue. So, you're asking, well, how come we don't feel the motion? And then number two, how come we don't fly off the Earth? So, my training wouldn't allow me to answer the second question as confidently as the first question. But
what about your training as a human, though? What about your training with any movement that you notice? What about your training with the speed of anything? I mean, if you're in a car moving 1 mile per hour, there's a difference between that and 0 miles per hour, and it's a noticeable difference. So when you're standing still at 0 miles per hour, and the difference between that and 1,000 miles per hour is extremely noticeable. I mean, people can look out the window of a car that's going 65 miles per hour. You realize what looks like outside, what it feels like, and if that thing is all of a sudden swinging at 1,000 miles per hour. I was just bringing up because the whole idea of people saying, oh, well, if you're on a carousel that goes around once, well, give me a break. Are you going to scale things correctly? In which case you need to put that carousel out to 25,000 miles in circumference and move it around once a day. People in my mind would surely feel that presence. And I don't know if you've seen, there's some videos out recently, but one of them just shows some guy's got a big bucket of water on his car, and it's just sitting there. There's not a ripple in the water. There's not a movement, and he just walks up to his car and bumps it. And when you bump it, the entire water, here it goes, slish slosh. You can definitely see that the car has been pressed, has been touched, and the water starts moving. The fact that we see oceans, the fact that we see lakes standing still as can be, is evidence to me that we're not on a spinning ball. And so the difference for me versus 5 years ago is, before, it was very easy for me to just dismiss everything and say, well, somebody smarter than me has figured it out. Well, I'm not at a place that I can determine whether or not we're spinning, but my outlook is completely changed. I'm absolutely able to tell whether or not we're spinning. And in my mind, there's no possible way that we are moving through space at any speed at all, that we are stationary and flat.
Let me make a case. Let me make an argument for why we could be spinning and you wouldn't know it. And I would know, and none of us would know it. So a few things. So one is, yes, if you had a glass of water on top of a car and you went up and bumped a car, you would probably see the water move. But I'm sure you've also been in a situation in which you've been in a plane, in a train, in a car, and you've had a glass of water or container of water and the surface has been still. I'm assuming you've been in that situation before?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that water is moving at whatever the speed is, whether if it's a plane, it's hundreds of miles per hour. If it's a car, maybe it's 60. If it's a train, maybe it's 100 plus. So just because motion's occurring doesn't mean that things have to be moving around. And so what we respond to, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is we respond in terms of our conscious experience to changes in motion, not constant motion. So, and I hear flat earthers sometimes talking about being in a car or on a train, and they conflate multiple senses. And so this is the problem. So I've heard people say,
But real
for example,
quick, you said that, hold on real quick. I just want to double check. You said that we do feel acceleration, but we don't feel a constant speed. So the Earth is a constant acceleration. It's constantly changing speeds. There's nothing standard about it. There's nothing that just sits there at that speed. So I'm confused what exactly that means. If you're talking about, we're constantly changing speeds and directions in 4 or 5 different directions. I mean, we're going at different speeds. We're, 1,000 miles per hour in a rotation, and then we are going 66,000 miles per hour around the sun, 480,000 miles per hour around the Milky Way. So, I mean, I guess I'm confused. Isn't that constant acceleration or deceleration?
Well, I guess it's constant. It's fairly constant motion in a particular direction where there's perturbations, but the perturbations may not be big enough for our sensory system to register it or to experience at the conscious level. Because one thing to understand is we are experiencing all kinds of stuff at an unconscious level that we don't experience at a conscious level. And in a way, that's a good thing. I mean, if you experienced everything that was impacting you at a conscious level, it would be very hard to exist. For example, if you constantly the whole day felt the touch of your clothing on your skin, it might drive you crazy, but our skin is constantly in contact with our clothes, and so there's that constant pressure. But what happens is our sensory system habituates to that. I could sit you in front of a computer screen and flash pictures on the screen, and if I flashed them at a quick enough speed, it would be subliminal, meaning you would be taking it in unconsciously, but it wouldn't register consciously, so it wouldn't become part of your conscious experience. So our sensory system takes in way more information than we experience at a conscious level. So those perturbations that are happening could be registering at an unconscious level, but it doesn't mean that we're going to experience them at a conscious level. And that's kind of a good thing. I would say that that's very adaptive if you just look at it from a biological, psychological point of view, that's actually going to help us survive, because we're going to be able to focus on what we need to do to survive and not be distracted by this constant barrage of sensations that are not going to aid us in surviving. I mean, one thing, if we look at the whole body of research on our sensory systems and our nervous system, I would say the one overarching conclusion is our system is designed for survival. And what's not going to benefit us for survival may not get into our conscious experience, and our system may not be designed to be sensitive enough to detect everything that's happening in the world.
So doesn't that
especially
leave
if
us,
it's not something that's going to be helpful for survival?
Doesn't that leave us open to any kind of foreign entity telling you that something's happening that's not?
Well, I mean, it depends on.
Well,
can you give me an example?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't depend on anything. I'm just saying that once you've said that, I mean, for instance, you believe that you're spinning 1,000 miles per hour. If tomorrow that we got informed that actually the math was wrong and that we're actually spinning 7,000 miles per hour or 7 million miles per hour, there's not a lot of difference that would happen. You would just be, I guess that is what we're spinning, because you're basically saying that no matter what that speed is, that we wouldn't feel it. We're currently, according to the globe model, flying around the Great Attractor at 2.2 million miles per hour. If tomorrow that got changed to 4.6 million miles per hour or 156 million miles per hour, there's no change on Earth. None of us would even know. So the fact that that is the case, doesn't that leave us open to being told that we're spinning, being told that we're upside down, being told that we're perpendicular, being told that we are anything as long as it doesn't impact our conscious being?
Sure, that's true. But I guess I would argue that what you said is true, but that what you're pointing out is not evidence that the Earth can't be spinning. It's not evidence that the Earth is spinning. It's evidence that we could be on a spinning Earth and we wouldn't necessarily feel the spin, and that not detecting spin is not evidence for an absence of spin.
Not detecting spin is not evidence for there not being spin?
Not to be able to detect spin in terms of our nervous system. Like our nervous system's ability to detect spin is not evidence that the spin is not occurring. That's why people do things like use like the Foucault pendulum or, gyroscopes that you can use to detect the motion of the Earth, because those are sensitive enough and they're designed to pick up that motion. Our nervous system is not designed,
exactly.
I would argue, to pick up the motion of the Earth.
You just said an interesting thing, that something is designed to pick up some sort of motion or designed in a way to show motion, and that's where science becomes a little bit questionable. And one of the reasons that you just brought up the Foucault pendulum, but nobody uses that as an excuse or a evidence that the Earth is spinning, because there's so many things inherently wrong with it. Number one, it's controlled by a mechanism. I mean, people think that the thing would keep spinning. The thing would stop spinning in no time. You could start swinging it, and within minutes, it would be done swinging. That's the way the Earth works. People think it like continues to spin perpetually, or it's some sort of perpetual motion machine. It's nothing. It has a mechanism, a magnetic mechanism that pushes the pendulum to continue spinning. So nobody even uses that. And there's also, you can look it up on Wikipedia, where during eclipses, it's been noticed many times before that the pendulum switches directions. So why the hell would a pendulum switch directions just because the moon or sun passes in front of each other? And that's been noted by NASA, and they just call it an anomaly. Well, it's an anomaly. But I think that's very interesting. So I know we kind of got off to a start where we didn't really have any. I know you have a ton of questions for me, and I don't want to ask too many questions from you. But I think there's a problem or an inherent, I don't know if you want to call it it's not an attribute. It's more of the demise of humans when they just simply fall for what they're being told without critical thought, and the fear of being called stupid or being possibly maybe your monetary intake is going to be affected. One of the examples of that is, I don't know if you saw that this week, what happened with Steph Curry, who is the best shooter in NBA history, plays for the Golden State Warriors. And in a podcast and in a low-level podcast that really nobody listens to, in passing, in a 2-minute passing, he just mentions that he doesn't think we went to the moon. And then everybody else in the podcast says, nope, we didn't go to the moon, nope. And then one girl says, you sure? And he said, no, I don't think that there's any way. This is somebody who's, extremely educated, who just simply said that he doesn't think we went to the moon. Well, within days, he had to come out and say he was kidding, which is just it is an absolute abomination to humanity that somebody has forced this man to lie. And then this is okay with the media. This is okay for them to come out and say, oh, Steph Curry has now admitted he was lying. No. I listened to the podcast. There's in no possible way is he lying. He's telling the absolute truth, and somebody has now forced him to go back on his truth, to go back on what he believes, and to say he was joking. He wasn't joking. This is a fact. And so the fact that on a low-level podcast, you can't say something like, I don't think we went to the moon, without being berated by the media. I'm sure his agent quickly called him and said, dude, do you want any more Nike deals? Do you want any more of these kind of deals? I'm your manager. You need to take that back and say you were kidding, because or else they're going to hang you. And isn't this, I guess you're in the business that you'd be able to describe it better than I can. What do you call that when it's the social dynamic of the way that they want the Earth to work, that if you say something against it, you will be hung out to dry in the news media until you retract? Same thing happened with Shaquille O'Neal. Same thing happened with Kyrie Irving. If you dare say anything against the standard accepted beliefs of, and it's a religious belief in my opinion, a huge religious belief, the worst religion that there is, astrophysics and all this nonsense, places people have never gone, that they read books and they say, well, this stuff must all be true. It's here in my textbook. It's got to be the fact. Neil deGrasse has never been to space. He'll never go to space. He'll never test anything from space. But I guess my question to you is, what is that called when the entire media and the social dynamic of being able to just state what you believe, how can anybody hold that belief if the second they say it out loud on a podcast, they have to retract it? Is this what we think is a good way to go about our lives and let people not believe what they want to believe, because if you dare say it out loud, you will be hung for it.
Sure. I mean, I think it's part of, I think there's two things. I mean, one, it can be part of a manifestation of the stigma that I talked about before, that you and I have talked about. And sure, I mean, if you want to maintain a mainstream belief system, then you penalize people for deviating from that, and you penalize people for doing so in public ways. So certainly, you know, if you and the other people in the flat Earth community are right that the shape of the Earth is being, you know, covered up, the actual shape of the Earth, then sure, like that would be a great way to maintain the lie and maintain the deception, is through that kind of social policing. But just because...
Okay, but if we're wrong, then what is the social policing about?
Well, I think that, you know, it's people, I think, tend, when they perceive an idea or a belief as ridiculous or silly or irrational, then they tend to react with negativity. So
I don't. There's videos on YouTube by the millions that people get on there and state things that I don't believe at all. They get up there and they say crazy things, and guess what I do? I just don't watch the video. I just
right,
ignore
and that's
it.
why I said tend to, because, you know, it's not inevitable that people will react that way, and it's not that people have to react that way. It's that they're choosing to react that way. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that there are multiple possible explanations for what you're just describing. One possibility is that it's happening because they want to maintain the lie that the Earth is not flat, but there are other possibilities, right? There are other ways that we could explain it. And, you know, if you want to convince me personally, you're going to have to eliminate all the alternative explanations until the one that you think is the case is the most plausible, or the only one left on the table. And if you can do that, then I'm all ears. But yes, what you're describing, I see that happening too. But the reason why it's happening is another question altogether, in addition to whether it's happening. But yes, I would say it's penalizing people for having certain beliefs or certain views, and the reason why they're being penalized, you know, is that because they're being perceived as silly for, you know, having silly beliefs? Is it because people are, you know, trying to maintain a deception?
It's the way that you make religions kind of bulletproof, right? I mean, it's the method of Scientology, where if you dare speak out against what we're doing, then we will end you. We'll take you out of the organization. You'll be excommunicated. It's the way of the Catholic Church. It's the way of most religions, and it's also the exact method that's used in science. Rather than having people go out, question things, they say, you know, so basically what Steph Curry is saying is that he's questioning the moon landing, which should be okay. It should be fine for him to question the moon landing. He's a human being just like everybody else. And I've seen people come back and say, well, has he seen that there's footage? It's like, yes, anybody who's ever said that the moon landings were fake, believe me, has seen the footage. That's the reason that they're claiming it's fake. They're not just claiming it's fake because they heard about it in passing. What? People have been to the moon? I'm not even going to look into that at all. I'm just going to claim it's fake. No, nobody does that. It's when people have looked into it, they've actually researched it, and come to the conclusion that it's not possible that humans have gone to the moon. They won't be going back. And the reason that we haven't gone further than 250 miles since 1973 or 72 is because we can't. And I don't know how long it takes till people come to that conclusion. It should take 5 years, maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 20, not 50. At this point, it's clear cut that space travel can't be the only technology that's ever gone that far backwards. It's just impossible. It doesn't make any sense. And so we know that things get cheaper, they get easier, they get more advanced, they get more technologically sound, safer. But the problem is when you've gone to the moon 6 times easily in 1969 and 1972, nobody got hurt, nobody died, everything's just fine. So the fact that we haven't even gone back since then, or that no other country has gone back. I mean, if you have a position on the moon, you have superiority over the Earth. Militarily,
True, I think,
yeah. Go ahead.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah. I do tend to talk a lot too, so if you need to interrupt me,
okay.
just cancel me.
No problem. I appreciate the passion. So, you know, I think one problem with what you just described, and I see this happening a lot with people in the flat Earth community in terms of the way that they, you know, construct arguments, is is there. I mean, you're describing a situation and you're attributing one explanation to it, and I could come up with other explanations. Like I could say, you know what? Yes, it is weird that we haven't gone back to the moon and no one else has gone back to the moon. And yes, technology does get better and cheaper, but for example, going through areas of radiation with analog equipment is different than doing so with digital equipment. So we have to figure out how to get through that belt of radiation safely with new equipment. Like Tesla, for example, couldn't just make a car without testing the brakes, even though they have better and newer technology than 40 years ago. They still have to go through the process of going through all the safety testing and making sure that their new cars with their new technology is safe. So, and also it costs a lot of money to go to the moon. I mean, NASA spent a lot of money at that point in our history to do that. And I mean, either way, they had to spend a lot of money either to fake it or to actually go there. And so the budget today for NASA may not allow it, given how much it costs. And it just wasn't, it's maybe just not a priority right now. Let's assume the moon exists and we've gone there already. Like, how would we benefit from going to the moon again? There was a clear benefit for going to the moon before because it was about winning the space race, which was about, national pride, a feeling of national superiority. So there was a huge motivator back then. And I just don't know if there's a strong enough motivator today to spend that kind of money.
Let me stop you there because I want to ask you, what do you think that the Russian belief about the American moon landing is? Do you think if you went and talked to somebody in Russia that they would tell you that, yeah, America beat us in the space race, they were better, they got there faster? Is that what you think the belief is in Russia? Because it's not. The belief in Russia is that the Americans wasted a bunch of money on the moon when they didn't need to, that Russia gave us all the technological advances, and then the United States went and did something dumb and went to the moon, found nothing, did nothing, and came back, and they wasted all that money. But you're describing it as if the American point of view is the only point of view, that we won the space race and that's what we needed to go for. But people don't realize that was played at a different fiddle in Russia. They don't believe that we won the space race. That's ridiculous. Russia doesn't go around saying, yep, we just missed the space race. The Americans beat us there. That's not what they're told. They're told something completely different because each country plays to their citizens. So
sure, and that's the thing is I don't, in a way, it doesn't really matter to some degree what Russia believed at the time or what they would even say now. What matters is what Americans were believing about themselves and their perceptions of how other people would react to that. So if Americans at the time believed that it would make us look good, then that would, perception is reality in the sense, in that sense that if we believed we would look better, and if Americans got to feel like they were superior in some way, then
you just described exactly why they would fake it. You just described it perfectly. It's perfect for the American belief and the ingenuity of Americans, and how if we come together that we can make something happen and we can actually do things if we put our minds to it, and if we get people in the STEM research fields, that the outcome will be more things like this moon landing, even though
but
we don't see that.
I don't know if you noticed, you just jumped to a different argument. Because I don't know if you responded to my point that because I hear the argument that you made a moment ago is what I tend to hear flat earthers talking about, that, well, we know that it was all fake, the moon landing, because why wouldn't we have gone back to the moon? Why was technology getting better? And so the problem is you haven't eliminated a whole bunch of alternative explanations.
But there's many things. I mean, I'm very shorthanding it, but I mean, we could go into all the reasons that flat earthers don't believe we went to the moon. The fact that they've lost all this footage, which is just ridiculous in and of itself, the greatest human achievement of all time, and they've lost thousands of tapes of it. It doesn't happen in reality.
But what I don't hear flat earthers doing, because I hear you. Like there are many points that flat earthers will point to, but what I want to see is a flat earther. And please, if there's a video you've made or someone else has made that does this, please, feel free to point me to it. I want to see a flat earther make a video where they say, okay, here are all the suspect facts or the suspect pieces of information. Here are all the possible explanations for why this would be the case, and I'm going to eliminate all the explanations and just leave on the table, deception as the as the most plausible or really the only likely explanation. I haven't seen that done, and I mean if the flat Earth community wants to approach this topic from in the spirit at least of the scientific method, then you as a community you're going to have to do more work in terms of eliminating alternative explanations, because that's such a big part of doing science is eliminating alternatives, and that's why science is an iterative community-based process. And that's what you have. You have a community of people who are all, working together to, to the end that you're working towards. And you're going to need to eliminate alternatives. I would say if you want to be convincing to more people, there are going to be people who are going to just come back with, like we've talked about character attacks and calling you ridiculous and silly and irrational. But there are people who are willing to listen, but you're going to need to give them good evidence. And and saying, well, we know the moon landing was faked for these reasons, they're going to come back and say potentially, well, how do you know it's not for these other reasons that have nothing to do with the shape of the Earth?
Well, that could go for anything, right? I mean,
sure, yeah, and that's what
sure.
my job is. I think as my job is also to eliminate alternative explanations. That's why I said. But
you'll never. You can get to one. You're saying that you've gotten to one explanation for something. No, I could always come back with a different explanation. And say, well, why isn't it this?
That's why we do experiments, because that is the.
All right. Well, wouldn't it be quite easy for NASA to shut me up by going back to the moon? Wouldn't it be quite easy for NASA to shut me up by putting a live camera from the moon? Because the moon always faces the Earth. So you would just put a camera on the moon. It would always be facing the Earth. And you would never have another question from another student in school that says, well, I don't understand eclipses. Can you explain eclipses? Well, here, we'll go to the live video feed from NASA. It's a simple camera on the moon that shows you the Earth at all times. And here comes a solar eclipse, so we can watch what happens during that. And here comes a lunar eclipse. We can watch what happens during that. That would be easy to shut us up.
That would be great. I mean, I wish they would do that. So do I. But right now, I'm sure that's a very low priority, doing something like that.
Well, of course, because it's something that would prove what I'm saying. Of course, it's a low priority.
Well, again, that's right. That's your explanation. But there are many other ways we could explain why they're not putting money into putting a camera on the moon. I mean, given how much money it would take.
That would not cost money. That would not cost a lot of money. They could easily. You're talking about once you get to space, you wouldn't even need to expend that much fuel, because you just squirt your fuel in that direction and boom, you're going. It's not like you need to constantly. There's no restriction. There's no medium that you're going through that would need to slow you down. It would be simple for them to put a camera on the moon, and anybody who says anything different is based on what we've been told and what we've been shown, and the fact that NASA gets $56 million a day. Simple. Mm-hmm. So my question would be to you, because I guess you would say there's many other reasons for this too. Did you watch the recent Mars landing? The Mars InSight landing? Okay. Mm-hmm. So my question as far as that goes is, why wouldn't we have cameras on this craft?
It's a good question. I have no idea. If I knew someone who worked for NASA
But don't you understand that there's an infinite amount of answers to that? That anybody could say, well, it costs too much money. Well, it's too hard. We don't have enough battery power. There's not enough solar power. There's not enough juice. There's not enough wiring. There's an infinite amount of answers to why we didn't put one on there. So you want me to, and you're saying that for me to say that Mars InSight landing was fake, that I need to go through and eliminate every other. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to eliminate any other possibilities because they're all ridiculous. That's just so ridiculous thinking to think.
But what is your evidence that these other possibilities are ridiculous?
Because there's a camera on everything, dude. There's a camera. It's 2018. People need to wake up and stop just believing what they're told. You're just somebody, and I'm not trying to get mad at you. You're just somebody who's going to say, well, there's other reasons. I'm sure if I knew somebody at NASA, well, I'm sure somebody at NASA would tell me another reason. Somebody at NASA is not going to say, well, because we're faking it. Of course not.
Of course not. If they are faking it, they're not going to admit it. Not at this point.
I don't even think they would know. Nobody in that room at the Mars InSight landing facility has any clue that is all being faked. No idea.
Sure, you could compartmentalize knowledge of that for sure. You don't need everyone who works for NASA to know that that's happening.
So the fact the thing is, they could eliminate that. They can eliminate me even having this conversation with you by putting a camera on the craft.
But that's assuming, why do they care about people who are debating about the shape of the Earth?
Because I pay their salaries. Why not care?
Okay. But that doesn't. I mean, but if you and this is what I'm. I guess what I'm talking about.
But think about what we're talking about here. Is it'd be the equivalent of a baseball. Hold on, but it'd be like a baseball team or a baseball whatever having one camera at the facility for a baseball game, And people saying, well, can we get another camera? And them saying, well, what does it matter to you? What difference? Well, because I'm paying to see it. So it does matter to me. I do want to see multiple camera angles. I do want to see a live view from space of the Earth. And they don't show that.
I mean, I guess I think I would say I mean, yes, it's reasonable for you to question why these things are not happening and why these things are not the case. And I agree with you, like, given where we are with technology, given what we've seen NASA do and what we know they're capable of, these are all reasonable questions. But
they've
the
given
chain of reasoning going from they can do it easily, therefore, if they're not doing it, it must be because they're trying to maintain this lie. Like, to me, that's a big leap. And
to me, it's the tiniest little step anyone's ever made. Because it's not like
is,
last time they went, there was cameras on it. It's not like the first time they went, there was a ton of cameras on it. It's not like the last time we went, we did have a camera on it that showed you 24/7 view, and this time we don't think it's that important. It's that they've never done it. That's the problem. Is that if they were hiding all this stuff, this is exactly what we would get. So I'm sorry, I don't have to eliminate any other reasons, because if they were lying, then we would see this, and we see this.
Right, but this behavior is not, like, lying is not the only causal pathway for this kind of behavior. There are other possible causal pathways.
Well, sure, because, okay, so get this. There was 200 people in that little room looking at their consoles, right? And I'm a believer that none of those people are in on the reason why there is no camera. So, of course, all 200 of those scientists, they believe in another reason. So I'm not saying that of course, they've been told there's a reason why there's no camera on that craft, for whatever reason they've been told. But that's what I'm saying, is that you're telling me that I need to go and disprove all the things that those people have been told to prove that that's not the real reason. Well, you're just going to allow deception for your entire life, because you're basically saying is we need to go and disprove all the other reasons before we get to the true reason. Well, then it's easy to deceive people. It's simple.
At least what you're, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it can often be challenging to eliminate all the alternatives. And, but what is your evidence that the reason why they haven't done these things, which they should be able to do, is because they're trying to cover up the actual shape of the Earth? Like, what reason do you have to believe that?
Okay,
like, what have you seen or heard that suggests to you that this is they're the only people for not putting cameras on?
Well, they're the only people that can go there. So it's very easy to see that if you're the only people who can go to Mars and you're the only people that can check up on yourself, then by not having a camera, then you are God. You are gospel. That it has to be true what you're saying. Nobody can go there and verify what they're saying. They sent one little image back, or two little images of the craft, could easily have been taken from Devon Island. And it's ridiculously simple to send data through a computer back to consoles. People are sitting there thinking that the numbers are real, and it all can be done in a computer. It's very simple to fool people. So the way that I could, and it's very simple to disprove me, by putting cameras on the damn craft. I mean, you saw the Tesla car in space, right?
Yes.
What did you think of that?
I thought it looked like a car orbiting space. I mean, that's the thing, is when you're asking for video evidence, and then when you get video evidence, you find ways to discount it.
No, well, I was getting to that they provided 3 hours worth of video footage. And that was it, and it cut off. But now it's supposedly traveling out past Mars orbit, and it's going around the sun and everything, but the video's gone. So you just got that one little video feed of the, I mean, I struggle to have a conversation really with people who would see that and not say, wow, that looks really fake. So you're saying, you just said to me that you thought it looked like a car in space. That's really what you believe?
It looked like a craft in space. I mean, the thing is,
the red car with the guy with the dummy in it looking at the camera, that looked like a craft in space to you? I mean, you've been watching too much Star Wars and too much Star Trek.
I mean, to me, there's nothing in the video footage from SpaceX or from the ISS that's, to me, glaringly
okay, how about the fact that
suspicious?
Really, that the ISS has been in orbit for 19 years and has never once provided 24/7 video footage of the Earth? That's not suspicious.
No, it's not suspicious.
What?
Because I'd have to talk to someone and be like, hey, why? This is weird that you're not
they tell you right on their
this.
screen. They tell you on their screen. It says we're currently switching cameras. Because in baseball games, when they switch cameras from one view to the other, I guess it takes about 40 minutes for that camera to switch views. It's ridiculous. It's like we have to suspend all of our beliefs in the real world. We have to suspend all those beliefs to believe in NASA, to believe that things aren't possible that we know are possible, to believe that things can't be done that we know can be done, that we know how easy it is to provide 24. There's a 24/7 video camera on Andy Warhol's grave. You can go look it up. It's online. You can just pull it up, and there's the camera, 24/7, always on, no problems, and nobody's making $56 million a day to provide that footage.
Right. I mean, I hear you. I think there are, all the things you're pointing out are things that are weird, things that are maybe hard to make sense of in terms of why they wouldn't be doing things differently. But I think that the problem is that.
But this is all over. This is rampant in the beliefs of conspiracy theories versus the beliefs of those who think that everything's on the up and up. I'm guessing, and I don't know this because I don't think we've discussed this, but do you think that a plane hit the Pentagon? 9/11.
Well, that, 9/11 is a conspiracy that I've heard engineers and people in those kind of fields talk about the way the buildings collapsed, the two main towers.
Okay, well, hold on. I was just to keep it on the right subject. I'm talking about specifically the plane hitting the Pentagon.
Oh,
do you believe that happened?
I've also heard information about that makes me think that there might be something fishy going on.
Okay. Well, at least you say that.
I mean, like, I am not someone who is naive enough to believe that governments aren't deceptive, that people don't try to maintain their status and power in ways that are deceptive or harmful to others. I mean, I have no illusions about how horrible human beings can be.
Okay, time out. If you think that about things on Earth that we can test, that we can go and follow up on, that we can actually watch video footage of, that we can, why would you not think the same is true when we're talking about Mars, a place you and I will never go?
Right.
But you're able to say that, well, I think it is deceptive, and I think there might be something at play there, but you're not able to say that about a place that they would have complete control over. They have complete control over Mars. So I believe there's a disconnect there where you're able to look at evidence and say, well, there was 26 cameras that line the front of the Pentagon building, and there's not one camera shot from one of those cameras showing any plane come anywhere near the Pentagon. Not one. And that alone is a question and should cause people to question it. But if you're able to say, well, yeah, that is a little bit fishy, then you need to understand why conspiracy theorists believe that about a place, Mars, that none of us will ever go to. That all we get is one snapshot image from a craft we're told is there that cost them a couple $1 billion to get there.
Right. I just, I think there's a qualitative difference, though. I mean, I have not seen, and feel free to direct me to any YouTube videos that you think I should watch, but I have not seen anything. I've not been exposed to any information about going to space, especially recently, that would make me question and think there's something fishy going on. Whereas the interviews I've watched with people about 9/11 do make me wonder if the narrative our government supplied is actually what happened. Now, who did 9/11? I have no idea. I'm not willing to make that kind of statement because I haven't seen any evidence for, strong evidence for who did it. But I don't know that it's, what happened is what the government said. So I'm, if someone shows me information about going to Mars, I've watched videos of the moon footage, like people critiquing the footage, or just, moon landing deception advocates critique the footage. And then I've seen like counters to the critique of the footage, and I am yet to be convinced. But I agree there are some suspicious things happening. But I think one of the problems is that what I'm feel like I'm hearing on your side is this kind of creation of a non-falsifiable position, in the sense that you say we need cameras, we need footage. Okay, we give you footage. SpaceX gives you footage, ISS gives you footage, and then you pick apart that footage and say, well, that's not. I have footage, but okay, that's not good enough. Here's the reason why I'm going to discount it. And so, I mean, what would convince you? Like, what kind of footage would convince you? Because I wonder if they give you footage provided by camera on the moon, would you just find a reason to pick that apart? And would you find a reason to discount it? Because you're going into it with the idea that it's not real.
How would I know at this point? I've never been provided that footage.
But would you go into that footage thinking, well, this is fake? Like they can't. I mean, there's no moon, or there's no moon to land on,
Well,
or the
yeah,
moon
at
is not
this,
something you can land on. So anything they give me, I've already written it off. Like that's, I think,
right.
one of the problems with conspiratorial thinking is that you develop a lens, and it's so easy. And I'm not talking about things that like just flat earthers do. I mean, we all do them. We all do this as human beings. We all have our lenses, and so we interpret information through that lens. And so when I hear people talk about conspiracies, what I tend to hear is looking at information in a particular way so that they protect their belief system, and they create a non-falsifiable version of their belief system.
Just what you just said, but what you just said right there is exactly what every globe believer in the history of the earth has done. What you just described is exactly the problem that we face. It's not me remember, I believed what you believe. I believed in the globe. I believed in the spherical earth. I believed in all that until 4 years ago. And I changed my beliefs based on the evidence. Well, the same thing is not happening in reverse. I mean, we're not seeing globe believers, a lot of them, changing their opinions based on evidence. They just dismiss it and set up their own experiments that will show what they want to show. I mean,
well, but so do flat earthers. I mean,
sure, but hold on,
right?
Just real quick on that one. And I'm not going to disagree with you, and I think there's a lot of experiments out there that I disagree with now. I wouldn't have anybody do any more laser experiments across water because the fact of the Glober argument, I can see their argument. I don't agree with it, but I can see it. But I don't know if you saw the video. I'm sure you haven't. I just put it out yesterday or day before. There's a observation that's been done across the Monterey Bay here in California, and or you're West Coast too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in the Monterey Bay, somebody set up their camera about 1.5 feet off the water in Pacific Grove and set a mirror, and this is like a back of a door mirror, so it's a 5 feet long by 2 foot wide mirror. They set that up at the beach, so the mirror is actually laying down horizontally on the beach. The water's coming up, almost touching the mirror, and it's been observed. There's a video of it. You can see it. 13.23 miles. So on the globe belief, if you believe in the globe, then there should be a 30-foot hump of water, which is an obstruction that has to completely block that mirror. And what that mirror is doing is reflecting the sun behind the observer right back to the observer, and they're seeing that reflection. Well, if you're seeing the reflection, and I've gone out with a mirror and did this for a few times this week, where I went out and had my wife shine the mirror to reflect it into my eyes, and then we would obstruct that mirror. And the second that mirror is obstructed by anything at all, I don't get flashed in the eyes anymore. It completely shuts it down because I have to literally see the reflection of the sun in the mirror in order to be blinded in my eyes. Well, the second that mirror is obstructed by anything, that ends the observation. I can't see the reflection anymore. But in this test, we're seeing the mirror across 13.23 miles, and it's being obstructed by a 30-foot wall of ocean water. So, I mean, but these tests are coming forward, and people will just dismiss them, and you will dismiss it, and you will, and so will many other people, even though it's being proven right in front of your face that the Earth is level and stationary and flat. So okay, maybe. So have you already presented your argument for why you believe that the Earth is stationary? Like, would you say your proof of that is because you don't feel the motion? Sure. Yeah, you can call it that. I mean, I think it's been, Albert Einstein said that there's no optical experiment that could ever prove the Earth moves. So it's not just me; it's other things I've read. Michelson-Morley experiments. There's tons of experiments that have been done and then spun by the scientific community to mean something they completely don't mean. And then people say, "Oh, well, the Earth doesn't spin." The Earth spins, but all the tests have shown that it does not. So it's certainly not just, well, I don't feel it. If there was tests and I went back and followed these tests and the tests showed that it does move, I would say, oh, I guess it does move. But when I go back...
do you have a problem with using gyroscopes to detect the Earth's motion?
Do I have a problem using gyroscopes to detect the motion?
Well, not like you personally, but do you think a gyroscope is a legitimate tool for detecting motion?
I would have to do more research on that to give you exactly my opinion on that. I don't know if that's a good tool to be used to determine whether the Earth's moving, because I think that the sky does move. And so would the sky cause the same effects on the gyroscope as the moving Earth? I don't know that.
Right. And, and to be honest, like that's, I'm in the same camp as you. I, I have no training on using a gyroscope, but I know that I've just Googled, put into Google, tests of the Earth motion, and I found a few scientific articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals, and a gyroscope was one tool that they use. So,
Yeah, it's just with those tools, and now the way that they are with the ring laser gyroscopes, and everything is so intricate, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying that they're very exact, right? All the things, but you don't get to see a lot of what goes on in these mechanisms anymore. It's done internally, so there's a lot of things you could program the thing to do. I don't know.
Right. I guess I feel like that's what you just did. I feel like is a move towards non-falsifiability, because you say there's no way to measure it, and I say, what about gyroscope? Maybe that's a legitimate way. Well, they're too intricate. True.
It's because we're not talking about a simple device. I mean, if you're talking about a simple gyroscope that you spin and it sits in your hand or on one of those little cradles, I don't think that gyroscope does show that the Earth moves. I think you're talking about a ring laser gyroscope or a fiber optic gyroscope, where they're very intricate, and I've read into the patents of them, and they seem entirely possible of falsifying results. I think it's entirely possible. But what I did say was that I would have to look into more. If somebody told me, well, a simple gyroscope proves the Earth spins, then I would love to go test that. But all these tests are usually outside of the realm of everyday Joes of performing.
Right. I mean, and I can send you after we finish. I'm happy to send you the article I found. The kind of gyroscope they're using is a micro electromechanical gyroscope. Obviously, I'm not completely sure what that means exactly, but I just want to reiterate what we talked about before, that just because we don't feel the motion doesn't mean it can't be happening. Like, our nervous system is not a good source of information for evidence in terms of whether or not the Earth is spinning. It's just not. I mean,
our inner ears work as gyroscopes. They let you know exactly when you're off kilter. I mean, your body's an amazing mechanism, right? And you're just saying we don't need to know if we're spinning around the universe.
Right, we don't. I mean, we just don't for survival purposes. And actually, we all know what it's like to be in a state of constant motion and not feel the motion. So when you're in the car, I've done this myself when I've been driving just to test it, and it's only when you decelerate or accelerate that you really feel a change in motion. Right. Now you see motion, right, and you might hear motion, and the problem is that your senses bring everything together into a unified conscious experience. So, so we're going to know there's motion there, but not because we're feeling it in our body. It's because we're seeing it, we're hearing it. We may, feel wind against our skin. So when you stand on top of a train, you're not feeling the motion that you feel when you start to accelerate or decelerate in the car, and or you're in a roller coaster that you kind of feel in your body. What you're feeling is you're feeling the motion through the sense of touch, or through the sense of, sound or sight. So I think that it's, I think the best that the flat Earth community can do is to say with the motion, you can legitimately say.
So, but you have a group that's saying that the Earth is spinning and that we wouldn't feel it, and here's all the reasons why you wouldn't feel it. But to me, it's just a really, really easy thing to say. Well, that's just an explanation for why the world is as we observe it, which is it doesn't move. What I'm saying is that science seems to take everything to an extreme level where we just simply feel the Earth not moving. And so they have to come up with reasons why we don't. Of course they have to, because otherwise their whole theory is out the window. So
sure,
should
that's
it be
why you can legitimately ask them for, you can say that's why I think it's legitimate for you in the flat Earth community to say, look, okay, we don't feel this motion you say exists, so you need to show us it's happening in some other way. I think one of the problems is that,
well, you'll get laughed at, and if you're Steph Curry and you say that, you'll get told to say that you're just kidding.
Sure, and that's I agree. Like, there is a problem with that, in that it's counterproductive to suppress thinking, to suppress a different way of thinking than the mainstream dominant way of thinking. And I agree, like, that's problematic. I mean, we're not going to move forward as a species, Gesundheit, unless
excuse me, thank you, a little sick.
No worries. Unless we allow people to express, deviating views, and then we we talk about those views and we hash it out.
That's
we
where all
figure
the
out
growth.
where
That's
the
all where
truth
all the
lies.
growth comes from, right? I mean, that's where learning comes from. That's where
Sure.
Inventions come from, or discoveries come from. Is breaking the holds of the current thought. Everything
Sure.
that's ever been discovered in the world is because somebody didn't believe in something that they were told, or didn't wanted to explore it more, wanted to look into something, and so now we have people doing that, and they're getting shamed for it, and that's a disgrace to science. And it's science is the one that's doing it. Science is the
Yeah.
one shaming.
Right. I mean, I agree that when suppression's happening in science, that's anti-scientific. Like that's not in the spirit of the scientific method, and it's counterproductive. And I mean, that's
So why does science do it?
because science is a human endeavor, and it's not science, it's humans. It's not the scientific process or method, it's human beings. We bring our humanity into that process of doing science. I would say that science is actually flawless as a method, and how it gets screwed up is
People
is what people bring into it.
Right, people have to determine what the scientific test tells us.
Right. I mean, we have to determine what the information means. I mean, who gets grant funding is based on prioritizing, one topic of research over other topics of research. So certainly, it's an imperfect process because human beings created it and
totally agree with
implemented it for sure.
I totally agree with that. And it becomes a problem when, like you said, the funding comes for the experiments that back up what the corporations want to see or what the current belief is. So it doesn't become advantageous for people to challenge scientific beliefs. It's like the whole idea of evolution to me, when it comes down to Neil deGrasse Tyson saying on a science show or something, he says, well, the great thing about science is one person makes an evolutionary discovery and then many other scientists want to challenge that, and they try and go, but it's just not true. It's not what happens, because there isn't scientists out there challenging the evolutionary belief. If you make an evolutionary discovery, you say, well, this animal turned, whatever. Well, there is no scientists out there that say, I want to go challenge that, because there's no money in that. There's no money in challenging that.
Well, I would argue that challenge does happen in science. I mean, one really easy
and quick
way to become famous in science is to conduct an experiment in which you find data that conflict with the mainstream view and a mainstream theory.
But you have to get it through. You'd have to get it through peer review and everything, right? I mean, that's not a way to become famous. It sounds like something Bill Nye would say. No scientist becomes famous for that.
I can tell you, like, as a scientist, as someone who's gone through, like, I've been on both sides of the peer review process. I've been the peer reviewer and I've been peer reviewed myself. I mean, I'm not saying this to like boast or to brag. I don't think I'm better than anyone else, but so I don't think when people think that's where I'm coming from. But I mean, at this point I've published about 30 articles in peer reviewed scientific journals, and I've also reviewed just as many. And most of the time, I let the action editor know for that journal that this paper is not ready to be published because there are some big problems with it. And I don't care what the ideas are in it. Like, I don't care if the theory is in line with.
Yeah, but if you're an astrophysicist, and somebody's saying the Earth's flat, what do you think that conversation is going to be like? What do you think that review of that paper is going to look like? Do you really think that peer review is a good thing in that case?
Well, I think that it's our best option, because in the sense that we need people who are trained in that area, who can properly vet the information.
Why
would the methodology?
But why would we need people trained in astrophysics if we're saying that the Earth is flat? If we're saying the Earth is flat, astrophysics is garbage. It's a complete and total pseudoscience, complete and total horseshit. So why?
But they are still talking about
they're
forces of nature.
They're talking about their beliefs. They're talking about their religion. They don't have anything to do with my beliefs.
So who is best suited to review papers then, if not other scientists?
Who's best to review paper? Oh, I'm not sure that whole process is what's working best.
Well, then what would you?
Now you've got a group of 400 men who have spent their entire lives believing in one certain belief, and that they've even done papers themselves on that belief, and that they've gone around to different colleges and speaking engagements and spoke about that belief. And so when anything new comes into the play, they're going to completely dismiss it. Because
not necessarily. I mean, that depends on. You're making a very general statement. I mean,
but now you're believing that these people aren't human then, because you're believing.
I'm not saying.
You just said that these were all humans.
Will happen, and I'm saying it might happen, but it might not. I've seen both things happen.
I've never seen
in the field of psychology, and so I don't think that you'd have to make an argument for why the people in other fields are more likely to be dismissive of non-mainstream thinking than people in psychology, because I see it happening both ways in psychology. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Because psychology is not the same kind of science that we're talking about when we're talking about astrophysics, which is people claiming that all these lights in the sky are certain distances and that they're certain sizes and things that they can't go and double check themselves. They're just proclaiming it to be true. I mean,
well, that's not completely honest.
It is completely true.
They're just claiming. I mean, they're using
what do you mean?
Instruments and methods.
No, they're using, that's what they tell you. They're telling me that they use instruments and methods, but that doesn't mean that they're true. Just because you have a certain.
They're not? I mean, how do you know?
I don't know that. I don't know they're not. Well, because of the fact that and I've done a video about scaling and variance, that you can change the distances and sizes of everything in the sky, and it wouldn't affect anything on Earth. Go ahead and bring the sun, rather than it being 92 million miles away, make it 300 million miles away, and everything just scales accordingly and remains perfectly true, and everything we see from Earth is identical. Meaning if the sun is 300 million miles away instead of 93 million miles away, well, then it just becomes 3 million miles wide rather than 867,000 miles wide. It's the same exact thing. There is no proof there. It's just a belief. It's a belief in that math is reality, which it isn't.
Well, I mean, all we can do in science, this is all we can do on the Glober side, and it's all you can do on the flat Earth side, is all we can do is create models and see whether those models conform to what we observe. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying, that, you know, they could be way off in their calculation of distance and the model would still work, but it doesn't mean that that it's not a helpful scientific model to have. I mean,
sure. I never even said that the heliocentric model isn't a useful model. I didn't even say that. I said it's not true.
Like, so
sure,
you need
and
a
I didn't
model
even say that it's not a good model at predicting. I said it's not reality. We don't live on a ball spinning in space around amongst many other balls in space. That's what I'm saying.
But do you have a model that will do a better job of predicting?
I don't need a model. I don't care what model. If it better describes where we live or whatever, it doesn't mean that I live on that model. I don't live on a spinning ball in space. If that model best describes for people what they see in the sky, congratulations. Don't go around teaching people that it's true, that there's other planets and that there's other galaxies and that you can go there or that people can go there. We send craft there. That's what I'm saying is a complete and total lie. They've just convinced people that what they're telling them about the lights in the sky is true, that we can go to Mars.
So you're saying you're advocating for not relying on scientific models to understand what reality is. So what would you have us rely on instead?
Well, I said that if it's a predictive model, then that's great. It doesn't mean we teach people that that's the truth. That's the stretch that it went. That people, I mean, even I'm sure you've read the beginning of Copernicus's book, right? The foreword.
I haven't.
Oh, so the foreword of Copernicus's book, and now it's come back. And remember, nobody wrote their name at the end of this little preface. It was just a preface to his book that was, written whenever it was, 14 whatever. And in the preface it says, and I'll actually bring this up for you so I don't get it wrong, Copernicus, Revolutions of the Spheres. But it says in there that, that anybody who takes anything from this book other than, I don't want to get it wrong. Hold on. Let me actually read it for you correctly. So it's on the Revolution of the Heavenly Spheres. And then there's a preface that they say now was written by somebody after the fact. They actually say, oh, well, this guy was the publisher. He grabbed the book, wrote his own preface in Copernicus's book, and then published it. And then after, people said, what, Copernicus wrote this preface? And then they said, no, it was somebody else. I mean, you can believe that if you want, or you can believe that he actually wrote it. Let me get to the book real quick here. You can go ahead and talk, though, while I'm looking this up. Oh, are you there? I just wanted to read you this one thing here. Oh, okay. So this is the preface, and so it says now, if you look up the PDF version now, it says forward by Andreas Osiander, which is it's just a funny thing. Andreas Osiander was the publisher of the book, who gives people. There's never been a permission that I know of somebody who went to publish a book, and the publisher went in and wrote something before the book, and then published the book, and then after the fact, somebody said, "Oh, I didn't write that in my book. Somebody else did." But one of the things that he says here, he says. Therefore, alongside the ancient hypotheses, which are no more probable, Let us permit these new hypotheses also become known, especially since they are admirable as well as simple and bring with them a huge treasure of very skillful observations. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as truth ideas conceived for a completely different purpose, and depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered it. Farewell. So this is at the beginning of his book where somebody's saying, don't be a fool and think that these things are real. We're talking about astronomy, which is simply a mathematician's way of describing the skies above us. So even Copernicus didn't believe these things. Well,
So
you can believe that's Osiander if you want.
I don't know if you and your wife have kids.
I have a child, yeah, but he's older, over 18 now.
So he or she or they?
He.
So when he was younger, well, I guess like if he came to you now and he was younger, because I know that when he was younger you believed in the globe Earth. So if he came to you now as a younger version of himself, and he's like, "How do I discern truth?" What would you say to him?
You always have to look into things yourself. Take as much time as you can to weigh all the different evidence, and then make up your own conclusion. And do I think it's good to go to experts in the field? Absolutely. I mean, I don't believe big in going to the doctor. Like, for instance, I've had a little throat thing and cough for the last couple of days. I'm not going to go to a doctor for that. However, if I need heart surgery tomorrow, you can bet your ass I'm going to a heart surgeon. I'm not going to go to the guy across the street and say, well, I know you've done some research on heart. Can you do my heart here?
Right.
So I would definitely tell him that it is okay to weigh experts' opinions. But when you look into something like space and you realize that none of these experts have been there, that none of them have done any tests on they're not going to the moon and testing space, and they're simply repeating what they've been taught out of a book that they've read. That's all. The difference between me and Neil deGrasse Tyson is that he's spent an awful amount of time reading and memorizing the words of a book that I have not read and memorized yet.
I see. I think that's one of the I think that is a problematic way of thinking about the difference between like what he went through and what you've gone through, because and I hear this a lot with flat earth people. And look, I'm not going to claim to be an expert in physics or geometry or astrophysics or any of these areas that engineering, etc. But the thing is, having gone through grad school, having spent 7 years in grad school beyond my 4 years in undergrad, I can tell you that grad school is not just about memorizing and spitting information back. It is a highly rigorous process in which
you're not studying. But you're not studying a mythical place of space. You're studying real world things on Earth. I'm assuming you've gone through so much work, and I'm assuming that people that are heart surgeons have actually taken cadavers and done autopsies and cut people open, and they see how the heart works and they see how it all intertwines. They're not using the words of a book written in 1400 to basically teach them about the world. They're using more up to date studies. They're using, these things. People are worshiping, Newton's thoughts and they're not getting any new information. It's the skies are the way that they are. Now, granted, there's things coming in like, now we're seeing further, and we found these TRAPPIST galaxies or the TRAPPIST planets, and I understand that those things are coming in, but none of them are being. It could just be data. What more is coming in to anybody but data? That's all that's coming in from anything, right?
Right. But the thing is, the instruments that they use to collect the data, or I guess I know for you, you'd say that they claim to use the collected data. And so how to work with the instruments, how to interpret the data, all the information that we've gathered so far that you look at the new data in relation to, all that takes years. And one of the problems, I think, with the flat earth community is that there are so many people in the community who are trying to master multiple subjects that take someone years and years to just master one subject, like the kind of training you need to like become an engineer and a physicist, and all these other experts. It takes a decade, let's say, to just get really competent with one. And I see flat earth, and I appreciate your efforts.
But do you understand that makes somebody like Neil deGrasse, even if his entire study is bullshit and he would be the last person to know?
Say that one more time.
So somebody who has put in, like you said, 4 years of college, then 7 years of grad school, they put in all this time and effort into, astrophysics, let's say. Well, if the entire body of astrophysics is a farce, as I would claim, would that person be the first to know or the last to know? They'd be the last to know because they've been studied and learned and trained to be repeaters and great explainers of what I'm saying is a lie. That's all.
Right, but you're assuming, but you have to make the assumption. I hear what you're saying. Like if a field is a big lie, then they're going to be fed the lies and they're going to be trained in the lies.
Right.
But you still have to make the assumption that all the astrophysicists out there in the world who are claiming, like maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't actually do any experiments anymore. Like maybe he focuses on.
I don't think it's anymore. I was going to say I don't think it's anymore. I don't even know if he's ever published a paper.
So maybe he's never engaged in experimental research. I don't know, but there are however many thousands, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands, probably not tens of thousands, but let's say thousands of astrophysicists around the world who are engaging in experimental research. And so you have to assume that all the data they're collecting they're somehow fabricating it. They're not really using instruments they claim to use, or the information somehow
all
being
instruments
fed to
go
them.
through instruments go through computer. They're all computer data. They're all computerized.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. You'd have to make the assumption that there's a filter. There's a filter that's somehow feeding them deceptive information in some way. And so, again, like going back to my point before, what's your evidence that all these astrophysicists around the world are all either intentionally deceiving us or being deceived by someone else?
Okay, so
and
one
not
time,
actually
just as
capturing the information that they claim to.
Right. Just as an example, one time I was looking I said, okay, I want to find a satellite that's run by some college. And so I looked around and finally found I think it's Columbia University, if I remember right. I have the email still, that I found a satellite that was controlled by Columbia University. And I said, okay, well, let me email the head of this and try and get some information from him. Finally, he got back to me, and he was talking about the data that they get. And I said, are you the first ones who gets the data? Where does the data go when it comes from the satellite? He's like, oh, no, we're not the first one. It goes to the NOAA, then gets shipped to NASA, then goes through several channels, and then ends up here. And I said, but you run the satellite. You're in charge of it. And he says, yeah. And I said, but you don't get the data first? Nope, it has to go through the NOAA. So give me a break. I mean, that right there is where I'm like, come on. And this is not just a one-off. This is the way that it works in the industry. There is no college who's sitting at a computer who has control over some satellite in space. That it's all gone through several channels and usually days. I asked this guy, I said, well, what do you get? He says, at least many hours or a day later till they get the data. Oh, come on. When you're asking what the filter's right there. He just described it to you. If it wasn't about that, then they would get the data right away. And so would all these other astrophysicists. But they don't get that. They wait for the data to come into NASA. NASA compiles it, makes these printouts, and then anybody can go and access these printouts. So, of course, they're all getting the same results. They're all going to the same bank for their money. They're all going to the same repository for their info.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, certainly you present a case for how that deceptive filter could happen. I mean, I think there are bigger questions. Like, I mean, I feel like that kind of naturally goes into a bigger topic that we've already talked about around, what reason do you have for believing NASA is engaging in deception? But just to bring it back.
And you said you got to be, just so I can remember, you have to be done by 4, right?
Yeah, so like another 20 minutes.
Okay, and just everybody who's listening, if you enjoy this conversation, can you leave a comment when this video is done and just say that you enjoy it? Because I think Matt and I both are under the impression that we would be open to doing this again. But I also want people to say that they enjoy it. I know there'll be many haters, as always, saying, why would you talk to this guy? But I just want to see if a few people will let us know that it is something you enjoy, then I'm open to doing it again. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. Well, I guess maybe if I could just say one quick thing before jumping back to my point, but just that, I know that flat earthers receive a lot of criticism and character attacks. But I'm not one of those glow believers who, is going to do that. And like we talked about being at the talk, I just, before we dove into this, I think these kinds of conversations are really necessary. Just to kind of point out to your listeners who are listening right now, notice that, we haven't, I don't think there have been no character attacks on, ad hominem attacks.
I might have come close. Sorry.
I don't. Oh, you got angry at one point, but you're allowed to get angry because you're human.
Right. No, and the big difference to me is to all the other well-known channels that do use the character assassinations or the constant claiming of you're lying or you're doing this for money. Once a channel has made an outright claim that's a lie about me, it's easy for me to dismiss them. So the difference between Matt is I haven't heard Matt ever go and have a conversation with me and then go tell a lie about me in another conversation, or to claim to other people that I'm doing this for money, or to have a show tomorrow where he says, well, Jaren's a complete imbecile, and then want to talk to me again after that. That's what these other people do. Everybody's heard them all say it. They've all made their claims about me, that I'm a liar, that I do this for money, that I'm actually, whatever it is that they want to claim that I am. And then they say, well, Jaren, do you want to have a conversation with me? Why won't you come on my channel? Well, because you tell lies about me and call me names. It's pretty easy for me to turn you down real quick. And the difference between Matt and I is that it's a simple conversation where, we have different opinions, different beliefs. But like he said, I think it's important for everybody to hear it out.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Let's see. I'm just trying to think of. I know we can have another conversation, but I think I guess I do want to reiterate that point I made before. Just I think that I'm not saying that like there's nothing special about the training I went through, in the sense that you don't need to go through a formal education institution to do that, but I think there is something unique and rigorous about going through graduate training, because not only are you really digging deep into the information, you're honing in on one area of study, and that really needs to happen to become really confident in your understanding of that. And there's a vetting process where I had an advisor who was constantly giving me feedback to let me know when my thinking was off, when I wasn't, taking into account information that's out there. So I encourage people in the flat earth community and people in the globe earth community to just be mindful about the fact that this debate involves so many different domains, and I try to be really careful in terms of being confident, in terms of being able to make claims about things that I can be confident in making claims about. And I'm not gonna tell you that I know exactly how a gyroscope works, because I don't. So, I'm not going to make claims about that I can't back up. I would want to spend a lot of time, very rigorously studying and, using a gyroscope. So I see sometimes in the flat earth community, the passion for the subject, I think, causes people to maybe go beyond what they can really talk about. And I'm not saying that never happens with the globe earth community, but I definitely see that happening in the flat earth community. I don't know if you have what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I don't see any other channels that in the globe earth belief that are astrophysicists, or you know what I'm saying? So it's not like they have much more training either. It's just they're repeating what you believe, and so I guess you allow that a little bit more. But one of the things
there's like Godless Engineer, who's an engineer. There are some people out there who have training in those domains.
Yeah, I guess. That's what they tell you. Sure. He's a.
Well, sure. I could make up that I could.
Right. You don't have to have a PhD for all we know.
Yeah, right. I could have no graduate training. I could have no training in psychology. Right.
Right.
So it's true. And that's. I think that's another. That goes back to. I think you and I have talked about this.
But if an engineer knows the shape of the Earth.
Well, they don't know. Their training is not about the shape of the Earth.
Okay, well, that's exactly my point.
They have training in basic understanding of the physical world and certain forces and principles that come into play.
Just as much as a bus driver. A bus driver knows certain things about the place we live and how you drive around it. So
but an engineer is going to understand things like scientific concepts at a deeper level than the bus driver, unless the bus driver's taking
Doesn't
time
help
to
them know the
study
shape of
those
the Earth, but-
concepts.
Yeah, true. And that's what I'm saying, is anybody can have any studying in that particular department. And I understand what you're saying about, yeah, and like I said, I would send my son to an auto mechanic rather than, the neighbor who says, I've worked on a car once or twice if we
Right.
really have an issue. But one of the things I want to read real quick that you said in a conversation we had that I thought was a little bit interesting is you said, I think about what would happen if a bunch of globalists and flat earthers were to be taken in a rocket ship up to space. If we could all feel confident that we were not being deceived in any way in terms of the window we're looking through, distorting what we're seeing, having a video projected on the window, etc. What would happen if we saw the opposite of what we believe? What if I saw a flat earth? What would that do to me? To be honest, it would not change anything about my daily life and the way I experience existence at a profound level. I have no vested interest in the earth being a particular shape. Now, what I'm saying is that there is a ton of people that do have a very vested interest in the shape of the earth. Right?
Right. Yes. Actually, let me let me throw out an argument, and let me know what you think about this. I'm going to go ahead and argue that people on both sides of this debate have an equally strong investment in the Earth being the shape they believe it is, but for very different reasons. So, I have a vested interest in the Earth being a sphere because I don't want to feel like I've been duped in that major way by my government. And, I've been duped by, countless academics and scholars, et cetera. But it wouldn't disrupt my life in terms of my existential well-being or anything like that, or my spiritual beliefs. But there are people whose careers would be disrupted greatly, whose income would be disrupted if they found out the Earth were flat, or they'd end up in jail, or right there. There are certainly people on my side of it, so to speak, who have, like all of us on my side, have an investment in different ways. But I would argue that the people in the flat Earth community, even though there is stigma around believing in the Earth being flat, even though there are social costs to believing that, I would say that you and other people in the community also have a vested interest in maintaining your beliefs because, for example, people like yourself and D. Marble and other people like that have gained, social status within the flat Earth community. I mean, you're kind of like a superstar in the community, and that feels
superstar
good.
who does not feel good. Do you know how hated I am?
Well, you might be hated by people outside of your community, but when you go to conferences,
oh sure, okay.
I'm saying within the flat Earth community, you're a superstar. People like yourself and D. Marble, and so you have social status. I wish I had the kind of social status in the field of psychology that you have in the Global Earth community. That would feel really good. I wish I was as well known.
You mean the flat Earth community?
I wish I was as well known in psychology as you are in the flat Earth community.
Gotcha. Okay.
So and also I think because you're a smaller community, people who are not really visible in the community still have that sense of like belongingness that's being satisfied, that basic human desire. So I think that everyone has a lot at stake. I just think that there's very different things that are at stake. So which I'm saying that to kind of push back against the argument that we have more to lose than you do.
Well, I mean,
think we
the
have
thing
different
is,
things
I've
to
already, I mean, you can look at that many different ways. I mean, for me, if somebody proved to me that the Earth was a globe, I would actually be happy. It would actually make a lot of things easier for me, and my channel I would be able to do more with my channel, I think. At this point, I've kind of almost pigeonholed myself into this flat Earth, although the observation that I told you about with the mirror and other tests that are being done, and I think more people to get out. And the great thing about the mirror, I think you're the one who brought up to me even the complaint with people saying, well, when you have like D. Marble shooting a laser from one end of a lake to the other, that when D. Marble's on the observation side saying, hey, I can see the point of the laser, I can see the origin of the laser, that technically that could be the point where the laser comes over the hump of the curve, and therefore you're not actually seeing the origin of the laser, you're seeing the origin of it being able to be viewed by you as it's basically coming up over the curvature. This mirror observation completely destroys that. And so I'm hoping more and more people do these observations, but I'm not sure where it will get us. All I'm feeling good about is at least I can kind of start to move my channel into some other areas and some other topics once this has been solidified and proven without a doubt to me. Now, it won't be proven to a lot of people, and a lot of people will continue on with their own Earth. But I mean, for me, I feel like when you say, as if like, well, Jaron's got to keep this. Basically, what I think you're saying is almost like Jaron needs to keep this flat Earth versus globe Earth debate going. I don't want the debate going anymore. So I don't want the debate to last another day. I want people to know the truth tomorrow. Now,
right. I guess I would. Yeah, I wasn't speaking to the debate. I'm saying that if when we went up in that spaceship, if the Earth is round, that there'd be certain things that you would lose. And if we go up and the Earth is flat, there are certain things that I would lose, that we would both lose,
okay,
but
got
in
you.
very different ways.
Got you. No, I agree with that. I mean, I would lose face, right? I would have to come back and tell everybody, my apologies. It certainly looks like a sphere up there. Now, again, my problem with that, and I'll tell everybody to do this tonight, is that all astronaut helmets that have ever been in existence are a domed front glass. Please go into your kitchen right now, grab a wine glass, and look through the wine glass, and you tell me what happens to the observations around you. Any flat line will become a curve, and that's the astronaut's helmet. That's what they all wear. So when Richard Branson sends people into space, or one of these companies sends somebody up in a balloon and they go up high enough to see the quote-unquote curve, remember that they will always be wearing an astronaut's helmet. So anyway.
Right. I'm actually hoping, to be honest, that in the next couple of decades, commercial space flights are available, and hopefully they can construct the glass in a way that it will not distort the image at all, because I feel like in a few decades.
Well, won't people have to wear helmets?
Well, it depends on if they can make, I guess, commercial spacecraft that you can be in the cabin looking out of some kind of, viewing window, I suppose, without there having to be a suit on. I mean, so maybe that's not possible.
While you made the prediction that you hope to see, I will make the prediction that it will never happen.
Because
right. Well,
I know
impossible.
You don't believe in, right. I mean,
but that would because those kind of things would make my belief go away. If we started to have commercial space travel, and I talked to somebody who went up there, and that we saw the craft, and that there was no curved glass, then I'm out of things to say. My belief is squashed. Currently, my belief works great because nobody's going to space. Even though we were told that people would be going, nobody's going.
Right, but I think the thing is, the incentive to go to space, the incentive to commercialize space and make it accessible to the masses financially is not. The incentive will not be because we're going to resolve this, Earth-shaped debate once and for all. It'll be for other reasons. It'll be for profit. It'll be people will pay to go to space. I'll pay to go to space if I can afford it. But it'll resolve. I mean, it will resolve this debate. Don't you think?
I think so. That's what I said. But I don't. That's what I don't see happening. It's just like when, if they put cameras on these Mars crafts, that I think it would resolve the debate of whether we're actually on Mars or not. Now that they continue not to do that, even though we continue to say, why isn't there cameras? Why isn't there cameras? And they continue to have people in groups of 200 at consoles that wait for a tone and then celebrate, and they put that on the news and they tell everybody we went to Mars. And people believe it, and they keep handing their tax money over. Keep giving NASA that money because NASA keeps saying they're going to go. Just like this James Webb telescope, NASA says they're going to put a telescope in space, and it's already cost the American public $12 billion. It'll cost a little bit more by the time they launch it. Then they'll launch it. We'll see a pretty spectacular from the Space Coast in Florida. Everyone will go ooh and ah. There'll be a big fire and then a big smoke in the sky, and then the scene will change, and they'll tell us, okay, well, now the satellite's going to unfurl its feathers and it's going to reach out its solar arrays. We won't get to see it because we never do. And then they will start giving back images that they say will come from that telescope. And everybody will believe it because they won't put cameras on the device. We won't be able to see these solar arrays deployed because they never have done it because they can't, because it's not real. It's not happening in space.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, your argument is that what I'm hoping will happen will never happen because it can't happen, or of course they're not going to do that because then it would.
Right, but they can easily prove me wrong, right? Just do it. Put a camera on the moon, proves me wrong. Put a camera on these crafts, proves me wrong. But they can't do it, so they won't. That's why I'm in a great position, because I can keep challenging them. Go back and watch my videos for the last 3.5 years. I've made challenge after challenge after challenge to NASA. They've never done one, and they won't because they can't. Now people can say, "Well, Jaron, they don't listen to you." That's fine. They don't have to listen to me. They don't have to listen to me, but what they should realize is more and more people are listening to me. And the more people who listen to me are going to start having the same opinions and saying, hey, this guy's right. Why aren't they showing us cameras? Why aren't we getting videos? So eventually, they're going to have to do it. And when they do it, it's either going to be completely and totally obviously fake, or it will be real, at which case I'll change my opinion.
And see, that's where I guess that's my concern is, how will you know that it's not this lens that you have leading you to the conclusion that, well, it's obviously
I won't know,
fake.
but they had every opportunity to convince me. They had every opportunity with the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and when you look at that footage, it's completely and totally fake. I don't know anybody who would go back and look at any of the footage that's being provided and told to you is out of from space in the 70s and the 80s without coming to the conclusion that it's completely and totally fake. Now the problem is at this point is a lot of the CGI is getting so good that it's indecipherable from reality. That's the scary part. But they had an opportunity to teach people. It's just like when I went looking, you have to remember, I became a flat earther slowly over time. It's not like it just happened to me. Well, one of the things was I said, oh, well, let me go look at this 24-hour sun in Antarctica, which would prove, at least to me, that the Earth was a ball. If we have a sun that rotates around Antarctica in the south, well, when I went looking, there was no footage of it. And then when I found footage, they cut the video 8 hours out of every day. But tell me that the sun's going around. I said, well, why don't you have the camera on for 24 hours a day? I had to contact NASA and say, what's going on? They said, oh, well, there's not enough bandwidth for us to send the full day's worth of footage. I said, then send a week's worth of footage rather than a month. Nobody wants to see your video go for 15 hours a day and then cut out. But you're telling us that the sun's doing a complete turn. But we can't see that. Anyway, I know it's 4 o'clock, so I'll give you a final word. You can say whatever you want, and then if people like it, please comment so that we can do it again. But Matt, go ahead and just tell people a final word if you have one.
Well, I guess thanks for having me on, and it's been an interesting conversation, and there's so much more I'd love to talk about, so I hope that your listeners enjoyed it so we can have another opportunity to chat. I mean, like you said in the beginning, even if neither of us budge, which it sounds like was the case, we still had an interesting conversation. I had fun doing. I hope you had fun as well.
It'll take me a little longer than 2 hours to convince a PhD scientist, unfortunately.
Yes.
Let's
try another 2 hours. You never know.
You never know. Real quick on the super chats. Thank you from Alan, Taco Mahooligan. Hugo Perez said cameras, and you will said CGI. I don't know what that means. And the man who loved the flat Earth said, please ask him for his scientific evidence of a globe. He's a PhD. Says Nathan Oakley, 1980. Okay. Maybe I think he gave us some of his please ask him for his scientific evidence of a globe. I'm sure you would think you have plenty of that, right?
I do. I'm happy to get into it next time.
Okay, well, we'll have that as a topic for next time. And I do appreciate you being with me. I know it's been, I guess we almost got to 2 hours. So, yeah, let us know. Comment if you want to see it again, and we will do it again. He's Matt. I'm Jaron. And I remind you to do your own research, because when you do, you'll never again believe what you've been taught. Till next time, guys, this has been Jeranism. Peace.
Bye.